The building he walks toward is small. Single-story, brick, a faded county seal above the door, a parking lot that fits maybe 12 cars. This is Caldwell County, ranch land and interstate frontage, where roughly 19,000 people live, and one man holds the keys to the jail. His name is Sheriff Delbert Del Rourke. He is 58 years old. He has worn the star for 16 years, won 4 elections, and never faced a serious challenger. By every public measure, he's respectable. Rourke coaches the Youth Baseball League in the spring. His photograph hangs in the County Chamber of Commerce beside a plaque naming him Public Servant of the Year 2021. He speaks at high school graduations. He shakes hands at church suppers. When a tornado tore through the eastern part of the county in 2019, he was photographed pulling drywall off a trapped family with his bare hands. That photo ran on the front page for a week. That's the man the community knew. The man the FBI and Homeland Security investigations had been building a case against for 14 months was someone else. The story doesn't start with Rourke. It starts with a wiretap in a different state, a federal narcotics investigation out of the Southern District of Texas, targeting a transportation cell tied to the Cartel del Noreste. Agents were listening for drug loads. What they got instead, on a Tuesday afternoon in late 2023, was a phone call about a jail. A mid-level cell coordinator, identified in filings only as CW Affiliate 2, told a colleague that a courier had been picked up on a routine traffic stop and was sitting in a county lockup near the interstate. Then he said something that made the monitoring agent lean forward. He said not to worry. He said the sheriff up there was taken care of, and the man would be back on the road within the week. No ICE hold, no transfer, no problem. A detainee flagged for an immigration detainer is supposed to be held for federal pickup. Someone was promising that wouldn't happen. The call was flagged, transcribed, and routed to HSI. HSI recognized a pattern it had already half seen. An ICE Form I-247A is a request asking a local jail to hold a person up to 48 hours beyond their release so federal officers can take custody. It's not automatic. It depends on cooperation. In counties that honor them, the system runs quietly. In Caldwell County, the numbers had started to look strange. Between 2021 and 2023, ICE's field office in San Antonio logged 41 detainer requests to the Caldwell County Jail. 8 were honored. The other 33 ended the same way. The detainee was released quietly, hours before ICE arrived, or the paperwork was logged as received late. 33 times, in a jail that processed fewer than 1,000 bookings a year. That's not a clerical rhythm. That's a decision, made over and over. HSI, Assistant Special Agent in Charge Marcy DeLeon, who supervised the immigration corruption side of the investigation, described the initial finding in a DOJ press briefing as a release rate that only made sense if someone wanted it that way. Her team pulled every detainer file and cross-referenced release timestamps against the jail's booking logs. A shape emerged. The detainees who walked free weren't random. A disproportionate share had prior contacts flagged in federal databases as cartel transport adjacent, men moving through the county on the I corridor, arrested on minor charges, then vanishing before federal custody. The ones with no cartel connection? Their detainers were honored normally. Someone was sorting them. The timing had a texture DeLeon's team couldn't ignore. The releases clustered. A quiet month, then 2 in a single week. When they overlaid the dates against known cartel transport windows, periods when intercepts suggested loads were moving north, the correlation was almost embarrassing. The jail's release calendar behaved less like a public institution and more like a logistics schedule. One analyst printed the two timelines on transparent sheets and laid them over each other on a light table. The spikes matched. She photographed it and put the image at the front of the briefing binder. Why would a cartel care about one rural jail in the middle of nowhere? Geography. Caldwell County sits on a stretch of interstate that runs like a funnel between the border and the distribution hubs to the north. A courier caught here and handed to ICE is a courier lost, deported, debriefed, gone. A courier quietly released is back on the road by nightfall. To the organization, that difference was worth paying for. The question was how to prove the payment. The FBI's Public Corruption Squad in Austin joined the case in early 2024, and the investigation split into two tracks. One followed the money, the other followed the phone. The money track was led by forensic accountant and special agent Ray Okafor, who spent 3 months reconstructing Rourke's finances. On paper, the sheriff lived on a salary of roughly $92,000 a year. His spending told a different story. In 18 months, he paid off a $31,000 truck loan in cash, put a $19,000 down payment on a lake lot, and made a series of deposits, always under $10,000, always in cash, always at different branches, that added up to more than $140,000. Structuring. Deposits deliberately kept below the $10,000 federal reporting threshold. One of the oldest tells in the book, and a felony on its own. But structuring proves hidden cash. It doesn't prove why. A defense attorney would stand up and say the sheriff won at cards, sold cattle, kept money under a mattress like his daddy did. Okafor knew that. The money alone was a wall, not a door. He kept digging anyway, because walls sometimes have seams. He mapped the deposits geographically and found something telling. The branches Rourke used formed a rough loop around the county, none of them the bank where he kept his ordinary checking account, none within 10 miles of the sheriff's office. A man depositing legitimate cattle money doesn't drive 40 minutes to a credit union in the next town to hand a teller $9,800. He also noticed the deposits arrived in bursts that trailed the release dates by roughly a week, the same lag Salazar's later recordings would explain. It wasn't proof, but it was rhythm. And rhythm was the one thing Rourke couldn't argue away. The door was the phone. The wiretap track, run out of the Texas narcotics case, had by now captured multiple references to the man up north. But Rourke was careful. He never spoke to the cartel directly. There was a cutout, a bail bondsman named Hector Salazar, who operated out of a strip mall office 2 counties over. Salazar knew the jail staff. Salazar posted bonds for the couriers. And Salazar, the FBI came to believe, carried the envelopes. On a wiretapped line on August 19, 2024, Salazar was recorded telling a cartel contact that Del wants it in 20s now, not hundreds. A small, greedy detail. 20s are harder to trace and easier to deposit. The sheriff had been thinking about the accounting. They had Salazar's voice. They had Rourke's finances. What they didn't have was the 2 men in the same room, money changing hands, and a purpose attached to it. So they built one. By late 2024, HSI and the FBI moved to a controlled operation structured around a real detainer. Agents identified a genuine cartel-linked target already in federal interest, arranged for him to be arrested on a legitimate traffic charge in Caldwell County, and lodged a real ICE detainer against him. Then, through a cooperating source inside Salazar's orbit, they let it be known that the organization wanted the man released before the hold could be executed. The offer was $15,000. The trap was live. Now they needed Rourke to walk into it himself. He almost didn't. For 2 weeks, everything ran through Salazar, and the sheriff kept his distance, exactly as he had for years. The recordings caught him only obliquely. A name, a nod, deniable. Prosecutors grew nervous. An indictment built on a bondsman's word and a stack of cash deposits could lose at trial, and everyone in the Austin field office knew it. Then the detainee's release stalled. A new jail administrator, hired 8 months earlier and not part of any arrangement, had flagged the federal hold and refused to process the man out without the sheriff's direct written sign-off. An accident of bureaucracy. Also the best thing that could have happened to the investigation. Because now, to get the courier out, Rourke had to touch it personally. The agents monitoring the case later admitted they'd held their breath for 3 days. There was a real chance Rourke would simply let the courier sit, accept the loss, cut his exposure, wait for a cleaner opportunity. That was the disciplined move, and Rourke had survived 16 years on discipline. But the ledger they'd find later suggested the sheriff had already spent the money in his head. He'd promised the organization results, and a man protecting a reputation for reliability will step out from behind his own cutout rather than admit he can't deliver. On February 27, 2025, Sheriff Del Rourke walked into the jail's records office, pulled the detainee's file, and hand-wrote a release order overriding the federal hold. He initialed it. He dated it. A surveillance camera the FBI had installed under a maintenance pretext recorded every second. 3 days later, the payment was arranged. Salazar, who by this point was cooperating without knowing how deeply he'd been compromised. The FBI had turned him quietly after confronting him with his own recordings, agreed to hand Rourke the balance of the money in person. $15,000 in marked 20s, serial numbers photographed and logged, treated with a fluorescent powder invisible under ordinary light. The meeting was set for the morning of March 3rd in the sheriff's own office. Which brings us back to the gravel lot, the coffee, the wave to the deputy. Rourke walked into his office at 6:16 a.m. Salazar was already there. On the recording, the exchange takes less than 4 minutes. Salazar sets a manila envelope on the desk. Rourke opens it, thumbs the bills, and says a single sentence that federal prosecutors would quote in every filing that followed. "Tell them this buys the next 3, too." Then he slid the envelope into a drawer. At 6:19 a.m., the door opened. FBI Special Agent Karen Mott and a 4-agent arrest team walked in, weapons holstered, warrant in hand. Rourke didn't run. He didn't reach for the drawer. According to the arrest report, he set down his coffee, looked at the badge on Mott's jacket, and said only, "You people don't understand this county." Then he stood, turned, and put his hands behind his back, beneath the flag he had sworn his oath under 16 years before. His hands, when they swabbed them, glowed under the ultraviolet light. I'll say this plainly, because it's the one place in this story where neutrality fails. A man who spends 16 years earning a community's trust and then sells the safety of the roads those same people drive on has committed something no sentence fully answers. That's not policy. That's theft of something you can't deposit. The indictment came down on March 11, 2025, in the Western District of Texas. Sheriff Delbert Rourke faced 11 federal counts. Bribery concerning programs receiving federal funds under 18 U.S.C. Section 666, honest services fraud, structuring financial transactions under 31 U.S.C. Section 5324, and conspiracy. Hector Salazar was named as a cooperating co-conspirator. 3 cartel side coordinators were indicted in a linked filing out of the Southern District of Texas. How did one sheriff override the federal system for 3 years without a single deputy blowing the whistle. The answer, laid out in the sentencing memorandum, is uncomfortable. Most of his deputies didn't know. The releases were processed in ones and twos, logged as ordinary discretion, buried in a jail that processed too few cases for anyone to see the pattern from the inside. The person best positioned to see the whole shape of it was the one man arranging it. It isn't only Rourke, either. It's the quiet efficiency of a small institution where one signature answers to no one. A county that size has no internal affairs division, no oversight board, no second set of eyes on a release order.
The system didn't fail because it was corrupt. It failed because it was built to trust the man at the top completely. And he knew it. The community reaction, documented in the local paper across the spring of 2025, moved through predictable stages. First, denial, letters insisting it was a federal setup, a witch hunt against a good man. Then the recordings were played in a public detention hearing.
The letters stopped. A woman who had coached alongside him in the youth league told a reporter she felt like she'd handed her kids to a stranger for 6 seasons. The Chamber of Commerce quietly removed the 2021 plaque. A smaller moment, the paper reported, landed harder than any official statement. At the first county commissioners' meeting after the arrest, a rancher named Earl Pettit, a man who'd voted for Rourke 4 times and said so, stood up during public comment and asked a single question. Which ones did he let out? And are any of them still driving my road? The room went quiet. No one on the dais had an answer. The minutes record that the meeting adjourned early. It was the first time, several attendees said afterward, that the abstraction of 33 released detainees became something a man could feel in his own driveway. What happened to the couriers he released? This is where the case turns genuinely dark. Of the 33 detainees improperly released between 2021 and 2023, HSI was able to positively identify and locate 11.
2 had since been arrested in connection with a fentanyl seizure in Oklahoma. 1 was tied to a homicide investigation in another state. The rest were simply gone, absorbed back into the network the sheriff had been paid to keep moving. Every one of them was a person ICE should have taken custody of, and didn't, because a man in Caldwell County wanted lake property. Rourke pleaded guilty on September 22, 2025, to bribery, honest services fraud, and structuring under an agreement that dropped the remaining counts in exchange for cooperation against the cartel coordinators. On January 14, 2026, in a federal courtroom in Austin, U.S. District Judge Eleanor Prasad sentenced him to 14 years in federal prison and ordered forfeiture of $211,000, the lake lot, the truck, the accounts, all of it. Hector Salazar, credited for cooperation, received 4 years. 2 of the 3 cartel coordinators remained fugitives, believed to be in Mexico. The forfeited cash included the marked 20s from the sting, still logged in an evidence locker in Austin. Every bill still faintly glows. Here's the detail that stays with the agents who worked it. In the desk drawer where Rourke slid that final envelope, investigators found something else, a spiral notebook. Inside, in his own handwriting, was a running ledger. Dates, initials, dollar amounts. He'd been keeping his own records the entire time, the way a man keeps books on a business he's proud of. 33 entries. The last one, dated 3 days before his arrest, read simply, "Next 3, paid." He never got to release the next 3. On the morning of March 3, 2025, the same gravel lot, the same flag, the same coffee going cold on a records room desk, the ledger stopped. And the county he told the FBI they'd never understand finally saw exactly who had been running its jail.